Welcome in, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Cream of the Crop, a fantasy hockey podcast. I'm your host, Blake Creamer. Please give me a follow over on Twitter/X. It's at Blake Creamer AG. Also, Apples and Ginos has an amazing Discord. The link is in the description. You get in there, you talk to me, you talk to Nate, you talk to other like-minded fantasy beauties, all right? Also, if you would do me a favor, head on over to YouTube and search Apples and Ginos. We got a channel over there if you want to look at this ugly mug, all right? Because I'm doing stuff over there, all right? But I digress. We got a great show here, and I want to get right to it. I've got an amazing guest with me here to discuss everyone's favorite position in fantasy hockey, goalies. Yeah. All right. This man here covers the Canucks for NHL.com. He's a correspondent with an amazing website and an online resource for up-and-coming goalies, ingoalmag.com. Plus, he's got a beautiful head of hair. Kevin Woodley, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing today, my man?
I'm good. The hair is getting gray and it's a little bit disheveled, so we're hiding her under a toque today.
Yeah, you know what? I've been wearing a hat for 10 years. That's fine. I'm 43. I made it this far. I'm married. I have kids. Whatever happens, happens.
Hey, listen, I'm 50 now. If the hair's still there, I'm happy.
All right, nice. That's a positive attitude, Kevin. Appreciate that. Apologies here for the greasy mustache you have to look at here. I'm doing Movember this month, so my wife, she can't look me in the eye. My kids, they're crying a lot when I enter a room. It's that's where I'm at with that, but it's for a good cause. So.
Hey, all about the good causes, but it's been made pretty clear to me that I'm allowed to have a beard. But if I shave everything but the mustache, I'm out the door. So I enjoy having a roof over my head. So I'm gonna refrain from that one.
Yeah, you know what? It's kind of one of those things you ask for forgiveness instead of permission. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's happy wife, happy life. You know the drill. All right. I just want to say Kevin was a guest of mine here on my previous podcast, Fantasy NHL Today. He was very generous with his time and his knowledge. I learned a ton. Kevin, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. If anyone's interested in that interview, go and check out Fantasy NHL Today. The stream there, it's still up and pumping there, but I'm really excited to get this information, Kevin, out to our listeners here at Apples and Ginos. How have you been? How was your summer, and how have you been enjoying the first 15-ish games of the season here?
Let's just say that I've been enjoying them a lot more. Obviously, covering the Canucks in Vancouver, it's been a lot more upbeat, a lot more positive. There's a lot of good things around this team right now, and contrary to the sort of narrative or popular belief that the media thrives on negativity and chaos, nothing could be further from the truth. It's just so much nicer to be around the rink when there are positives. And hey, not everything's perfect. Like there's ups and downs and questions to be asked when there are downs, but it's just, it's so much more positive around there for them and for us and for everything. And so that makes it, it's been a while since it's been like that. So it's enjoyable.
I know, man. I'm cautiously optimistic. All right. I've been hurt before and I'm ready to be hurt again by the Canucks. That's how we do here. But speaking of those Vancouver Canucks, what the hell is going on? Maybe you could shed a little bit of light on, maybe just talk about what Rick Tocchet has meant to this team this season, some of the changes maybe he's implemented, and just changing that defensive environment for the Canucks. Like I was looking into it, they have the best goal differential in the league. They're number one in PDO. They're number one in shot percentage. Like things are going great. What is it that Tocchet has implemented that has made this change?
Well, I mean, obviously, a big part of that goal differential is, there's been some lopsided nights, some crooked numbers, whether it's 8-1 against Edmonton to open or 10-1 against San Jose. And, clearly anytime the PDO is as high as it is, people start to look for regression, and it seems like it's inevitable. To me, though, the difference is when the shooting percentage comes down now, and even the save percentage as well. Obviously, those two numbers add up for PDO. Is it the difference between winning some games 3-2 and 2-1 versus 8-1, 10-1, and 6? We have a lot of 5-2 and 6-2 nights this year. And I think the reason you can be optimistic that they're a team that can play those types of games, we've seen a few. There's been a few. There was one recently against Seattle where, they weren't able to sort of play that way and stick to it through the third period and came up with a loss. But you look at the Dallas game, 2-0 over a stingy Stars team, and the way they sort of stuck with their structure. I just think, Tocchet will tell you about structure. There are just sort of non-negotiables in the way he wants these guys to play. And that goes right down to things as simple as he was harping on line changes this morning. Right. And a lot of people sort of roll their eyes at that, but it's been a drum I bang for years here in this market. Because listen, like if you don't hustle off if you don't take care of that small detail, it's not just that there might be a chance because of it, or you could lead to an odd man rush because you're not. It says everything about how much you care about your teammates. It says everything about a team mentality. If you're leaving the next guy hung out to take a minus because you didn't want to hustle to the bench, like, it's just one of those little things that is not just bad in terms of the chances it creates, but it's a bad sign in terms of team culture and team commitment. And so it's those little details. It's defensively the structure they have. I think too often we look at defense and think of the defenseman, and the reality is in today's NHL, it's 5-man units and execution and forwards backtracking. I had a great conversation with Binkle the other day or the other week, just talking about how much of a difference it makes to a defenseman when you've got forwards backtracking hard, and how you're able to now stand up at the blue line and force a dump in versus retreating and giving up potentially not just maybe a rush chance, but easy possession in your end and a cycle, and now you're defending. So just a lot of those elements have come from Rick Tocchet and the way they stress it and the way they coach it and the systems. But I also think there's just a maturity. Like, this group is growing up. And I had a really good conversation with JT Miller about it this morning. Like, he's been that young guy on the other end of it. So when he was with the Rangers, he was the young kid that didn't know how to do this stuff and took a lot of crap and from the coach in Elaine Vigneault and from teammates. And he's like, that's why I'm so hard on them now. And you're seeing a group in Pettersson and Hughes and even Brock Besser, who, when they came to this team, it wasn't making playoffs. There wasn't a demand for playoff hockey. There wasn't enough talent to score, and that's all they needed to do, right? Like, they were the young talent that was contributing offensively, and so that's all they had to do. And it took a while to realize that if you want to actually be a part of a team that wins, you have to do all these other things too. And some of them are hard work, and some of them are just about paying attention to details and executing those details. And some of them are about simplifying and not giving the puck away in bad areas and leading to odd man rushes against. And so for a lot of different reasons, it's taken them a little bit of time to grow into that. And I think, again, talking to JT today, like, he's like, that's just sort of part of the natural progressions. Yeah, maybe some teams, you think of Bergeron and in Boston and the way he demanded or set that standard for, every player around him. And maybe it happens faster there because of things like that. But that culture didn't exist here when these kids came in. And it's taken them a little while to sort of adapt to it. And I think part of it too is just being sick of losing and having a voice and talking, come in and show them this is what it takes to win. And them being at a stage of their careers where they're willing to listen to it.
Yeah, no, that is that's really interesting. You're absolutely right. I think in terms of, like, they're playing for each other, and there seems to be some accountability with this team. And that line changes, that seems like such a small thing, but I think you're right on the money there. Like, last season, JT Miller, Brock Besser, especially, these guys are just toddling off there. Meanwhile, something's going on, and it's palpable, kind of what's going on here. And I do think a regression is coming, but I don't think it's going to regress that hard when you got guys playing for each other this way.
No, I mean, if there's a regression coming, it's with the goal scoring. Even on ClearSight Analytics, the numbers, they're a rosier picture than some of the public numbers. Like, I don't think the public numbers, for example, well, I know they don't. As a matter of fact, most of the private numbers don't account for traffic and screens. And it's not just get bodies to the net. And, like, it's so much more than that, right? Like, you watch Besser net front, watch him and Miller work off each other on the power play. Watch the way they've integrated the Dallas high tip that Joe Pavelski does so well. They scored a goal the other night off that. Hughes to a high tip to Besser, and JT Miller pots the rebound. Like, they're layering their screens. Like, they're creating more quality than a lot of the models give them credit for, and yet they're still outscoring that. Even at ClearSight, they're still in the bottom third, and they're outscoring that. So that will regress. Where I don't know that I see a huge regression, there will be some, but not maybe to the extent that some expected, is defensively. Like, Thatcher Demko's performing at a level that, if he were to keep it up for an entire season, would not just be Vezina Trophy worthy, it would be historically great. And, we had a sort of historically great season a few years ago by Igor Shesterkin, and I think he finished with a +3.5 adjusted save percentage, which is just unheard of. Well, Demko's at +5.5. So that's probably going to come down. But the defensive structure in front of them, it's not perfect. There's nights where, the other night, against Seattle, again, like double slot line, back from one bottom of the circle, one side, bottom of the circle, the other, top of the crease, back door. Like, that can't happen. And it doesn't happen very often. That's, a couple times this year so far, whereas it used to be almost felt like it was nightly in the past. But their high danger chances against 5-on-5, expected goals based on high danger on clear sight, they're top 5 in the league. And to me, that's not just only a sign of sustainability if they can maintain the structure leading to that. And there are questions about whether they can. Carson Soucy out. Do they have enough depth when Hronek and Hughes aren't out there? But if they can, I think some of the defensive numbers you're seeing are more sustainable than a lot of people might believe. And so, and more importantly, that metric I talked about, that 5-on-5 high danger chances against, expected goals against, is quite often a very good predictor of playoff success over the past 4 or 5 years. And so the fact they're up there in that metric bodes well, not just for, hey, just getting in, anything can happen, but maybe having a team that's learned how to play a style that will make things happen when we get into that second season where the game, talked about today with the traffic, right? Like you don't score a lot of tic-tac-toes in the playoffs. You need to be able to get to the net. And I think not only do they get to the net, bottom 10 last year in terms of screen chances on net, I think they're 8th in the league right now by clear sight. But again, with a purpose, the way they're setting screens, the way they're moving screens, the way they're purposely trying to push goaltenders in certain directions, just as a shot is released. Like there's a lot of dynamic talent out there, but they're executing in more ways than they used to. It used to just be like over to the 1T. Now, like there's so many more layers to how they're attacking. And again, yeah, will it sustain at the level it's at right now? Probably not. But I think there's more sustainability in there than a lot of people are expecting.
Boom. I love to hear this. Oh my God. I could talk to you about the Canucks all night. So for God's sakes, yeah, we got to move on to the goalies, but that's high praise right there. And I can feel that just from the eye test, but I love to kind of get backed up with what you're talking about. So moving on, I want to talk something that we do here. Obviously we're doing fantasy hockey, but I'm talking to you about goalies. And I talked to you a little bit about this last time that we spoke, and I want to do it again for these listeners here, just valuing players. Obviously, we value players here. We're looking at metrics like, shots on goal per 60, scoring chances for, Corsi for, all that stuff per 60. That's how we sort of value our players here. Predicting goalie performances. First off, we do a strategy here called 0G. I talked to you a little bit about this last time, where you're basically spending less draft capital on goalies in draft season than your opponents, right? So
you're basically the Los Angeles Kings of fantasy hockey.
Yeah, sure. You know what? That's good. We'll take the Stanley Cups too. But yeah, so basically because goalies are ultimately less predictable, reliable, and more replaceable than most skaters. So question to you, at a base level, how predictable do you think goalie performance is?
Well, I mean, if I said it was really predictable, and I would be lying, because it's not, right? Like we see a lot of variance, maybe more than ever before. I do think you can understand the variance to a better degree and anticipate it at times in both directions based on the team environment and understanding the team environment. I'll use Edmonton for an example this year. Everyone's pointing at the goaltending. The reality is the team environment is what has created. Defensively, off the rush, they give up more of the most dangerous chances than any team in the National Hockey League. And so when that wasn't happening, when they were a top 10 for much of the season, a top 5 defensive team, much like in the same underlying metrics I was talking about with the Canucks, goaltending wasn't asked to do as much. And so the raw numbers look really good. And Stuart Skinner's at the All-Star game, and Stuart Skinner's, a Calder Trophy finalist. But a lot of that was, I'm not saying he was insulated, like he was full value for everything he did, especially in his first year in the National Hockey League behind a team with Stanley Cup aspirations. Like that matters. But you take away some of that defensive support and then wonder, what the hell happened? Well, first of all, goalies, sometimes that first year can be tough to repeat. Even look at Igor Shesterkin coming off the Vezina, the step back he took. There's so many factors there. In Shesterkin's case, it was just trying too hard to live up to the expectations he set. And literally trying hard in goaltending doesn't work. And you can see how it manifested itself in his game physically. A little more tense, a little wider in his stance. And all of a sudden, pucks he used to cut off with his shoulders are just going half an inch over his shoulder and in the net. Because what's he done? He's widened out at his stance. And what do you do when you widen out in your stance? You get lower in the net. So There's a lot of different ways these things can manifest themselves. But at the end of the day, the environment is such a big factor in predicting goaltending success. And so the lesson would be to look out for changes. And sometimes that can be a goalie changing a team. Like, for example, Joonas Korpisalo going from one of the most goalie friendly teams in LA to a team that is mid-pack in terms of that in Ottawa. The one in Edmonton is tougher to predict because nothing changed. The personnel was for the most part the same. The coach was the same, and just whether it's their willingness or their ability to defend, some changes. A lot of people pointed to them going to a box +1 like Vegas uses in the defensive zone. That wasn't a problem. Some changes in their neutral zone, a passive 1-1-3 like the Kings played, that may have been a problem. But really, I think it starts with their forecheck and guys, we talked about forwards backtracking and 5-man unit defending. Like, if you don't establish a strong forecheck, and they haven't, and teams break out cleanly on you and you're not hustling back, you're going to give up odd man rushes. And so, I look at Stuart Skinner and people are like, oh, you can't predict goaltending. Look at how it's fallen. I'm like, well, no, because this isn't what he faced last year. And so I think if he had faced this degree of chances, then the numbers would have looked different. And now he is. And so it's tough to predict, but I do think you can look at it with that information and say, well, this isn't goalies being voodoo. This is goalies facing chances that are apples to oranges from last season. So of course the results are going to be different. Skinner, as good as he's been, has never had super positive results against the rush. So maybe you don't want to be the dead last in the National Hockey League when it comes to giving up high danger rush chances. So that's just one example. I do think you can look at the underlying numbers, adjusted save percentage, and you can find things that you think will fit. You can dig into them to, like, for example, right now when I'm asked to look at the Edmonton Oilers, I don't just look at adjusted save percentage. That tells me how good a goalie's been this year relative to his environment. But in their case, I'm clicking on rush chances. I want to see how they are specifically against the rush and odd man rush chances. Like, how well did they fend? I mean, they're the toughest chances, but some goalies, every goalie has to be able to manage every type of chance. But some guys are just better skaters. Some guys are just going to be better in that situation. Some guys have a lot of experience. They're going to read that rush really well. So as much as it's unpredictable, if you know where to look, you can find some of the signs. Now, the problem is a lot of the stuff I'm talking about isn't publicly available data. It's not going to help you in your hockey pool, but it's just too easy to scream into the void, goalies are voodoo, when these things happen. And I think if you have a better understanding of the numbers and match that to styles and strengths and weaknesses and how the team plays, I think you can find a Charlie Lindgren, who, I said two summers ago, to me, had the potential to be the best signing of that UFA class at $1.3 million for 3 years. Took a little while, but the guy leads the league in adjusted save percentage this year, and they're only paying him 1.3, right? So Connor Ingram, as a guy that I thought teams should claim off waivers last year. Look, again, took him till December to sort of get comfortable in a new environment, new reads behind a new system and new personnel. But now that he's been exceptional for a year, almost coming up on a full year now in the National Hockey League. So there are signs. You can find these things. It's just a matter of knowing where to look and understanding that changing environments sometimes, even if it fits, sometimes you got to live through an adjustment period.
That's excellent. Yeah. That's one of the biggest things that I took from our last interview is that team environment. And I love that you talk about that because Joe Fan thinks, like the Edmonton situation is such a great example. And I've had that thought myself, like they're not getting any goaltending, but under the hood, they're not playing the same way they played last year. So that is such an important piece. And that brings me to the next question here. In your opinion, what have you seen that makes a good defensive team environment? Like, just in general, what is it that makes a good defensive environment besides like hustle and playing for each other? Like, kind of, the strategy, right? Like you talked about the Kings and their 1-1-3 and stuff like that. Is there something even predictable in that way? Like certain high quality teams like Boston or Colorado or, anything like this that are doing?
No, that's a good question, Blake, but and it's interesting. I don't want to speak out of turn because systems are things that, I'm still learning. And so to say that, I think we see this in Edmonton, like they changed their system to copy what another team that beat them in the playoffs was having success with. And again, the irony is I don't think their in-zone play is that bad, despite some, spectacular failed moments. that are all over the highlight film. I don't think that's the root of the issue. At the end of the day, it's about, from a goaltending perspective, in a game that has become increasingly unpredictable and incredibly challenging for goalies. And I've talked to a few guys that are like, the game has never been harder for us. Power plays have never been harder for goalies than they are right now. What these players are doing, the way they understand how we play and how they try and pick it apart, it has never been harder. Bringing some degree of predictability to that environment so that, and Rick Tocchet talks about it here in Vancouver, right? Like, I don't want my goalies having to go post to post all the time. I want them to be able to cut the ice in half and focus on these options because they trust their teammates, whether it's defensemen or forwards backtracking or flexing out on a flank shot, that they know the system and they're going to execute the system. It's a matter of, hey, when there's a screen in the middle and this guy's at the top of the circle, my job as a goalie is to be on the short side of that screen, because that's the shortest distance between that puck and going in the net is short side. And there's more likely to be traffic or bodies for that puck to hit in the middle of the net. So I'm going to pick short side. And when my defenseman picks a side of the guy in front of me in terms of the screen, or when my forward flexes out to that shot option, he better be in the middle lane. And he better not only be there, but he better be willing to eat a freaking puck while he's there. And that's something that hasn't happened in Vancouver for years and is happening this year. More guys willing to eat pucks. So like being able to trust that he's in the right lane so that I don't have to look back and forth behind that screen and try and find that puck. I can hold short side and see the release, which is so important for a goaltender. Again, being able to trust that all these guys are executing, and there's going to be mistakes. It's a game of mistakes. It's not perfect. But most times you can trust that guy understands where he's supposed to be, and he's going to try his best to be there and be effective in that role. And that can be a backtracking forward. Like it's execution within whatever system your coach implements, and it's consistent execution so that everyone else around you trusts that you do your job, so they only have to worry about theirs. Because as soon as somebody screws up, does everybody start trying to fill in, or do they go back to their job? Because when everybody starts trying to make up for everybody else's mistakes, pretty soon nobody's where they're supposed to be. Nobody's doing their job. And, quite frankly, that's what it looked like in Vancouver last year early. It's looked like that here a lot. And so when I see it with other teams, it's funny. I heard on the radio yesterday, like, what would Edmonton be like if they had Thatcher Demko? Like, it's not just the goaltending that they need better defense, but what would they be like if they had Thatcher Demko making some of these saves? And hey, man, Thatcher Demko's an elite goaltender. But do you remember what his numbers were when he was playing behind a team early last season that was playing that way? And health eventually became a part of it, but it wasn't a part at the beginning. And his numbers were terrible because there's only so much a goaltender can do when they can't trust anybody else to be where they're supposed to be. And that in a game that is increasingly dynamic, you have no predictability in terms of what your guys are trying to do.
Oof, no predictability. That makes total sense, but damn it. Oh God. I have a whole podcast based on predictability here, Kevin. This is, a little rough stuff, but that makes total sense. One thing I wanted to ask you about is, so in fantasy hockey, obviously we hate goalie tandems, obviously because you're not getting the starts, you're not getting that workhorse stuff, but
used to.
Yeah, no kidding. And I wanted to talk to you about
anywhere.
That. Yeah, it's obviously a trend that's happening in the league, and I wanted to just get your take on, first off, are you a fan of that sort of way moving forward, that deployment? And I just feel like there's very few true workhorses left in the NHL.
Whether it's travel, I'm trying to think, has it gotten any harder? Because there were guys playing 70 games not that long ago. The one thing that I would say is, and I've had this from a lot of goalies and a lot of goalie coaches, you can't get away with a B game anymore. Mm-hmm. Like if you have your B game, they're putting 5 past you. And that wasn't the case. Like I remember, guys like Roberto Luongo, when they didn't have their A game, just back up a little further in the crease, simplify your reads, try and get away with the B game. And you just can't anymore. Like you just can't. Like you'll be exposed. And that goes for a team having an off night, but especially for a goaltender. And so, I do think some of those workhorse guys, there were some nights where maybe they figured out how to manage their B game and get away with it. And so many guys tell me can't do that anymore. You just can't. So, and so what do we need to do if we rely on an A game every night at a time when the depth of goaltending is good, but we've lost a lot of those guys? Like, part of this is just look at the names. Like, look over my shoulder, Luongo, Price, Lundqvist. Like, look at the names of workhorse, like superstar goalies that we've lost in the last 5-6 years to retirement. Like Rinne, even Corey Cross. Like, there's so many guys that aren't playing anymore. So we're sort of going down. It's almost become a development league for young goalies a little bit. Never was before. Now, like, guys are in the NHL learning on the fly. And that wasn't the case in the past. And so in order to have all these guys at their best, to give them a chance to be their best, they need more time with the goalie coach between starts, to rest the body, to make sure that, they have that reset so that they are able to go out there and bring their A game. And I don't think it's going anywhere. I think you're seeing teams be smart about finding different ways to get guys rest, because you've seen it. Like, even if you get through the regular season, the chances of you having enough left to be at your best in the playoffs when it's supposed to matter the most are slim. So I think goalies could play 70 games, but what do you got left of that goalie when you need him the most? And I think that's part of the recognition here in terms of trying to balance out those workloads and not overtax guys to the degree we used to in the past. And those guys wouldn't tell you they were overtaxed, but the game's changed. Again, margin for error, dynamic offense. Like, you just cannot go out there with anything but your best. And in order to be at your best, you're probably going to need a few more nights off than you did 5-10 years ago.
How do you think that affects these goalies going into the playoffs? Like, because if they're used to just going, like what they're doing in Boston, for instance, or even in Minnesota, obviously that's been a, pretty rough start for them there. But, you make the playoffs and now you're expected to play 7 games. Like, how does that, do you think that's going to affect those goalies, moving forward?
I'd be curious to see how this, this is a tough one. I don't have the answer. I bang the drum for tandems in the playoffs too. Like, if you do it all season, do it in the playoffs. I think we saw with Linus, that's a tough one because he didn't play a ton during the season. And all of a sudden, you're right, he had to. And, he just wasn't quite at the level we got used to seeing, like, because he was incredible all year. And so then you go to Swayman in game 7. Well, he sat there for 2 weeks, right? Like, you could have gone to him earlier. And so I'm curious to see how they handle it. They have the ultimate tandem. Do they go to it in the playoffs back and forth? A lot of people crapped all over Minnesota for going to Marc-Andre Fleury, but the reality, if Gustafsson, if there's any question marks about him in a season that, frankly, statistically was the only one to come close to Linus Ullmark from an adjusted save percentage standpoint, and the only one other than Saros that maybe could have made an argument to be a candidate was Gustafsson. But one of the reasons he didn't play more in the season is just like the conditioning. He wasn't used to that type of workload at that level. And so they go into Dallas, one of the hottest buildings in the league, and they play a bunch of overtimes in the first game. There's no way you were going to be rolling him out at like 65%. And I totally understood why they went to Fleury. And, the crappy thing is he didn't deliver. And so now everyone says that was a mistake and you couldn't have done it, but I think in talking to some of the people there, like, they didn't really have a choice. Like, that was, and they'd played both. And the truth was Marc-Andre Fleury had been exceptional during the regular season in a reduced role. So they went to him and it didn't work because he didn't deliver, which sucks because everybody loves Marc-Andre Fleury and you want to see great things for him. And there was a ton of pressure and he wasn't at his best. So I don't think you throw the baby out with the bathwater in that case. I think it was a sound decision. I think it was part based on recognition that Gustafsson wasn't ready to be an every night guy in the playoffs, especially coming off a night like that one. And I think the one thing about Fleury struggling in that game that sort of helped this get lost is Jake Ottinger wasn't great either.
Yep.
And he played that big double overtime game. And if you watch in that series, like, he didn't really recover and look like himself until much later on. Like, there was a cost of playing that big overtime game in the Dallas Heat to start the playoffs. And, I think, again, if Fleury plays at the level he had down the stretch, this might be a very different conversation. And I think you combine that with what happened in Boston, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's a risk-adverse industry. Nobody wants to be the first one through the door. They're always bloodied. Minnesota's a great example with Fleury last year. You're going to take that heat. Not a lot of coaches want to take that heat. But I got to think that in Boston and maybe increasingly with time, are you doing it with Demko and Casey DeSmith? No. but a lot of these are job shares. Like even Ilya Sorokin, as good as he is, like Varlamov's been fantastic. Really curious to see how teams handle this going forward once these tandems that split games in the regular season get into the playoffs more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you there. I'd like to see a bit of an evolution in how these coaches sort of handle this, right? Like lay it out front, right? Like, yeah, okay, this is how we're going to do it. This is your start. This is your start, and kind of just keep it going, right, for consistency. Because yeah, there's also that mental piece, right? Like, how does Gustafson feel if Fleury goes out and wins that game 7, and now he's expected to, just be a professional, obviously come back in and take a back door to Fleury while he won the first 3 games. It's like, it's just interesting. There's such a mental aspect to all this technical stuff that we're talking about. Like there's that big mental aspect of the goalie position and just sports in general. And but I would love to see maybe if Seattle makes the playoffs again, they'll do it. That seems like something Dave Haxtell might do.
And the other thing too is like, you're never going to pull a hot guy, right? Like that's the thing. Like,
yeah,
I understand that too. Like this is what makes it so tough, right? Like I think Vegas, when they had Fleury and Lehner, if they could do it over again, the year they knocked out Minnesota in the first round, would have, if they could, like, if you could give true serum to Pete DeBoer and he had a do-over, I think he would have gone to Robin Lehner in the first round. Fleury they were bad as a team and they leaned heavily on Fleury in the first 3-4 games. And if it wasn't for him, they don't have a 3-1 series lead. So again, hot goalie, how you taking him out? But once it got to 3-1 and got to game 5 and game 6, they didn't play Lehner, and you could see Fleury starting to run out of gas. And so they ended up playing Lehner in the first game of the second round and basically gave a game away because he hadn't played in 2 weeks, and the team was exhausted, and they gave Fleury a night off. But again, true serum, I think they'd go back and maybe get him in earlier in that first round, Robin Lehner. And so it's easy to hindsight the ones where it doesn't work. Fleury last year with Minnesota. But I think we need to hindsight the ones where keeping one guy in clearly costs him being able to be at top form as time goes on.
Yeah, such an interesting point. Okay, I got another question here for you. So for us in fantasy, this is kind of what the 0G draft strategy is all about. There's always a number of goaltenders that emerge from nowhere to have massive fantasy value kind of during the season, right? Last year, we're looking at Stuart Skinner, Philip Gustafson, who we talked about. And in the early going this season, it looks like Cam Talbot is the guy. He's playing unreal. Is there any predictability with these players in situations? Even just Cam Talbot in particular, did you see this kind of coming? Obviously, we know LA is a good goalie environment, but did you expect this from Cam Talbot this season?
I'm not going to blow smoke and say that I was picking Cam Talbot first in hockey pools or calling him to be one of the league leaders. But I can't actually, because I got called on it when I said it. And it's I think it may have actually been a fantasy segment on Sirius XM NHL radio with Jim Gordon Boomer. And he asked me sort of for my pick, the guy who, every year he asked me for a sleeper. And, I said, I don't know if you can call him a sleeper because he is a veteran, but I liked Talbot going into that environment, coming out of an environment that he was maybe overtaxed. Again, I think Cam's a really smart goaltender with a really structured game. And you put him in an environment where those reads get a little simpler and more predictable. And he's going to have success, and good for him. He is. And so, I'm not backpatting because I get a lot wrong. They call me the donator in my hockey pool for a reason. But I'm at least on record as saying I thought Cam Talbot would be a guy that would have an exceptional season. And, part of that is Cam Talbot, the goalie, and the professionalism and knowing what he's about. But part of it is just, him in a perfect environment. Just like I said at the trade deadline last year that Joonas Korpisalo was going to be a perfect fit for the Los Angeles Kings, even though goalies don't typically have immediate success after a trade because of all the adjustments required. But there are less adjustments when you're playing behind a team that defends as well as the Kings. And so it doesn't mean you dismiss the results the goalies have in either. Easy environment, but you have to have the right mentality to fit in there. A lot of goalies over the years have gone to a team that, doesn't give up a lot of shots, and they can't handle it because they need to be busy to stay in rhythm. But Talbot's a guy who's got a really strong technical foundation. And so as the Kings have found their game defensively after a bit of a hiccup out of the gate, I'm not surprised that he is also having success behind that team. And there's been some adjustments with a new goalie coach, probably more so for Phoenix Copley because he was there last year.
Yep.
Mike Buckley takes over from Bill Ranford, who is now the director of goaltending. So on a day-to-day basis, what they're doing for Copley, it changed a lot. For Talbot, he's coming into a new team anyway, so it's all new to him. And I think Phoenix, maybe there was a bit more of an adjustment period. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is don't be surprised if he starts to have success again as well. He's a better, I know it was struggles at the beginning, but he got into some of the games where they just didn't show up. I know he's capable of better than that. And I think you're going to start to see that here in the coming weeks and months. And a lot of the people were asking questions about their tandem. It's being answered in large part because of the environment they're in and how well they sort of suit that.
See, I knew I should have talked to you before I drafted. All right, that was my bad. That was a mistake on my part. Although I did get, I did 0G, but I got Markstrom in a lot of leagues. I'm playing 9 leagues, by the way. I have a problem, but yeah, I got Markstrom and I got Grubauer in a lot of spots, and it's been pretty rough going so far. Although I do like what Markstrom's been able to do this season.
Markstrom's like top 15 in the league in adjusted save percentage. So that one's an environment. Like, he's given them everything that he can. He's been really good for that team. He needs a little help.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on in Calgary there, but there's been some signs of life, especially with guys like Huberdeau starting to at least just put some points on the board and get that kind of mental game going again. But anyways, I've got one more question for you, and then I want to do a little fantasy rapid fire if you'll indulge me. All right. Yep. So obviously we talked about 0G. I'm basically looking for, is there a goaltender or goaltenders across the league that you think will outperform general expectations for the rest of the year? So guys, maybe we can target in fantasy that might be not rostered like the big boys.
Oh, and this is I say don't play daily fantasy in hockey. How many starts do you need out of these guys? Are these guys you want to spot in every once in a while?
Yeah, don't even worry about that. Just a real general, like goalies that you're kind of excited about that maybe are a little underrated, that you think are underrated.
Well, I guess it's probably a little too late to point out Joseph Woll because he's already starting to have success. But even as the numbers have dipped, the public sort of what I call the NHL.com numbers that everybody sees, the raw save percentage and stuff, the underlying looks really good on him. Still a pretty favorable environment for him in Toronto, as it has been for all the goalies there. Sleepers. I guess Charlie Lindgren's out of the bag. Jonathan Quick's had like you watch him play and he's playing controlled and contained. Peter Laviolette teams, first year under Lavi, are always really good defensively. Jonathan Quick's been full value behind that team. Nedeljkovic is a goalie that I've always liked and thought he was an NHL goalie. I know he wasn't in the league much last year. Pittsburgh's underlyings aren't terrible, and he's had success early. I always see coming off the shutout, but I feel like he's a guy that could challenge for starts, especially with Tristan Jarry, off to, a more pedestrian start. I'm just kind of going through the list. I mean, Semyon Varlamov's been amazing, but obviously you're capped how much he's going to play, behind Ilya Sorokin. It's a bit of a tough one, right? Like, because it's all about, how much opportunity are these guys going to get? One guy that, you heard me talk about Connor Ingram, and he's getting more minutes and doing a lot with them in Arizona, but the team's limited. This guy kind of falls under that category as well. But a guy that I would have had last year on my go get this guy at the trade deadline list right behind Jonas Korpisalo, but then the Nashville Predators locked him up for another year. Now, I believe it was only a 1-year contract, so he's kind of right back into that situation. He might be trade bait. Kevin Lankinen has had success in the past, and the underlying numbers are on him. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Charlie Lindgren when he hit free agency. Like, there's some really good underlying numbers. He's made some adjustments to his game in Nashville over the past year and a bit with Ben Vanderklok, the goalie coach there, and they've shown up in the numbers. I like what I see in terms of the style and the way he's playing. There's a goalie there. There's a guy that in the right opportunity could be a number one. I can't tell you whether he gets that opportunity or when, or whether it's this year, but if you're in like a keeper league and you're looking for a buy low guy who like a year and a half from now, or maybe even next season, could get an opportunity to be a number one somewhere, like I believe in Kevin Lankinen. And then I guess the last one, and this is tough because you ain't getting wins out of them because the team is terrible, but I guess you'll get a bunch of saves. Mackenzie Blackwood is a stud. Mackenzie Blackwood is a guy who, with the right if he can stay healthy and as he continues to sort of progress, because he's still a relatively young goaltender, but I watched him the other night here. I could see him by 2025 being one of the three or on the list or in competition to represent Canada the next time we go best on best. And that, hey, some people say that's a statement about the depth of Canadian goaltending. But I believe in everyone I know, every goalie coach that has played with, like, the physical tools are unbelievable. The strength, the power, the size, unbelievable. And he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And if he can figure that part out, and it looks like there's been some good accounts from what I've heard out of people in San Jose. They were just through town here and talking to the goalie coach. He just can't believe how talented this kid is. So you're not getting wins, but if saves matter, Mac is going to make a bunch of them for the San Jose Sharks this year.
I love that. That is exactly what we're looking for here, Kevin. I love that you brought up Charlie Lindgren, because that's a player I'm very interested in, and I've picked up in a bunch of spots. He's still not rostered very much in fantasy here. Do you think that Lindgren takes the crease there in Washington, or are they doing more of a timeshare?
I think he's earned more starts. The problem was last year, even when he played, like, if you look at his numbers last year, he was getting killed because he was getting the garbage minutes, right? Like, and that's the job, right? You're the backup. Kemper's coming off a Stanley Cup. And so the second half of back-to-back against teams that are rested and also happen to be wagons, like, you're going to get chewed up and spit out. And he got a lot of those. And when Kemper got hurt, there was a period there, let's say midway through the year, where Darcy got hurt. And all of a sudden, Charlie got more starts and was getting all the games, not just the garbage time games. And he started posting some really good numbers. So this was there. It's all a matter now. Like, it seems pretty clear to me that he's earned more opportunities, and there'll be more legitimate opportunities instead of mop-up duty. That said, Kemper's got the contract. He's got the pedigree. He's got a Stanley Cup ring. He's a good goalie. He's a consistently good goalie. So it's not like he's going to take over the number one job. I don't see that happening in Washington. Too much respect for Darcy. But certainly looks like he's earned more minutes and a bigger chunk of a job share. And as Darcy gets older, his role is going to have to decrease anyways. We talk about the tandems. Like, I think Lindgren, again, like, is he going to be a number one every night starter ahead of Darcy Kemper? I'm not making that prediction, but I think he's going to get more minutes. And I think what you've seen what he's done with him so far. When I look at his numbers right now, adjusted save percentage, he's ahead of Demko. He's ahead of Swayman. He's ahead of Binnington, who's had a hell of a year. He's ahead of Markstrom, who's top 10. Like, he's had a really nice start to this season. Yeah, his sample size is still smaller, but he's been full value for the number he's putting up. And it's not like the environment's been great either. He's got an expected of 880. It's not like this is all a product of a super high expected save percentage. He's been full value.
I love that. All right. Well, that gives me some confidence there. All right. We've got a fantasy rapid fire here, Kevin. Do your best. All right. I've got maybe 4 questions here for you. Okay. Give me a one word, or see what you think here. Okay. Who is the goalie to own in Buffalo? Of their three-headed monster, who's the goalie to own in fantasy?
This year or long term?
This year. Yeah.
Oh, that's a tough one.
You can pass if you really want to, but then I'll have to, riff, and then people.
I feel like you and he's played well. He's played better this year. He's actually shut me up a little bit. His results have improved significantly. It looks like they want UPL to have a bigger role there. And be honest, the underlying numbers didn't support that in the past, but he's been full value for it. So until, like, Devin's the guy they really want to get going, but until he gets a little traction. You know what? I'd still take Levi. At the end of the day, to be honest with you, because there's 3 of them and because they couldn't defend to save their lives, I'd probably avoid all of them. But if I had to pick one, I'm a big Comrie guy. And like I said, UPL's played well, but Levi is obviously the one they've pegged as the future. And I think he's going to get the most opportunity. I don't know that they're going to send him down at any point this season. Yeah. So, and I believe in that kid and his upside, whether it's now or later. You put him with a little more structure in the way he reads the game, and I think you'll see better things. And Comrie, once again, second straight year, one of the lowest expected save percentages in the league. Like, that is a tough environment for a goaltender, and he's outperforming it. So I got that fence firmly up my ass with that answer.
You're so diplomatic, Kevin, and it's
well,
nice.
But I would actually say in that case, just like, again, because they can't defend, I'd avoid all three. And there's three of them, so you're never going to get a ton of minutes.
Okay. I like that. Same question. Who's the goalie to own in Carolina? All right. Obviously, Anderson is out, so we'll take him out of the picture. We're looking at Ranta or Kochetkov. What do you think?
I think it's Antti Ranta, and obviously there's a risk because he could get injured, but Kochetkov has a ton of talent. There hasn't been a ton of consistency. Could he get on an absolute heater? Yeah. Could that heater last a week? Yeah. But I don't know that it eventually the inconsistency will catch up. And one thing that Antti has been when healthy is a consistently above expected level goaltender. Matter of fact, he's been a really good goaltender when he's healthy. So give me Antti Ranta.
Love it. Okay. This one's just kind of a this one or that one. For your fantasy team, are you drafting Shesterkin or Sorokin?
This year I'm drafting Igor Shesterkin. It's like, I talked to different experts that like one over the other for varying reasons. I love Igor Shesterkin's game, but mostly it's Igor is playing behind a Peter Laviolette team in the first year as head coach. Great defensive structure. I think they've got a better team that can actually help outscore whatever does end up going in the net, and you're going to get more wins. To me, it's not a judgment of which goalie is better. That is just a smart decision. It's Shesterkin all the way.
There you go. And last question. Arturs Urbe or Johan Hedberg? Who are you taking in your fantasy team?
I can't remember any of their stats, but Johan's a friend. He wants to affectionately, he swears, called me a goalie geek. So I'm probably and even though he's gone to the dark side, he's a head coach in the SHL in
That's
Sweden.
right.
Now,
He is
not a goalie coach. And also because I want him to give me whatever like fountain of youth he's discovered, because he's 50 and he looks like he's 25 when I saw him this summer. I'm going Johan Hedberg.
I love it. I have good memories of both those goalies, especially Urbe's gear. That was just such ridiculous gear. The helmet, the neck guard. I don't know.
Listen, Urbe had the gear style, like with the literal couch cushion pillows for pads. But don't forget, Johan Hedberg and the Moose Mask launched sort of the concept of sort of unique caricature style goalie masks and put Dave Art on the map. Like, that was the first one that sort of brought this great Swedish painter to the National Hockey League. It was Johan's mask, the Manitoba Moose mask that he ended up wearing for Pittsburgh, that sort of launched a franchise, frankly. I mean, it probably would have happened eventually anyways, but that's the one you point back to when you see, now must be 2/3 of the league wearing Dave Art masks. So he's got some gear style too.
There you go. Shout out to Johan Hedberg, confirmed legend by Kevin Woodley. Kevin, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate you being so generous with your time and knowledge here. So definitely, Kevin is on X. It's at Kevin is in goal. And Kevin, I'd like to just give you the floor. Just plug anything you got going on there.
Well, first of all, as I mentioned earlier, I am nicknamed the Donator in my longest standing hockey pool. So maybe everything I say about which goalie to take, despite getting Cam Talbot right so far this year, should be taken with a grain of salt. I am not responsible for any individual losses in pools.
Disclaimer.
It's like a disclaimer. Yeah. That said, if you want to learn about goaltending, if you're a goalie, check out ingoalmag.com. I'll leave it as simple as that. There is literally nothing like it in the world. It's not just a guy like me talking about goaltending. It's me going into the rooms of the National Hockey League with videos of NHL goalies making saves or doing drills and having them explain the tips, the secrets, how they read the game, how they process the game, real-time video review sessions with some of the best in the game, and then also drills and gear tips and we basically take in an NHL room and ask NHL goalies to share advice with you, and they do it, including video. So there's nothing else like it. If you're a goalie, we'll make you a better goalie. If you're a goalie parent, we'll help you with that. If you're a goalie coach, we have over 200 professional goalie coaches, including some of the best in the NHL that subscribe. Check it out at ingoalmag.com.
Really, really strong work. Such an innovative idea and such a service you're doing to these young goaltenders, just giving them that pro read. I love that. So again, thank you so much, Kevin. I wish all the best to you and your family, and I hope to have you on again soon. Thank you so much for your service, and thank you, listeners, for your service. We are going to be back with another episode next week. Thank you so much, everybody. Celebrate your day. Bye for now.